The Romanovs, The Final Chapter, by Robert K. Massie. Part 1. The Bones. Chapter 1. Down 23 Steps. At midnight, Yakov Yurovsky, the leader of the executioners, came up the stairs to awaken the family. In his pocket he had a Colt pistol with a cartridge clip containing 7 bullets, and under his coat he carried a long-muzzled Mauser pistol with a wooden gunstock and a clip of 10 bullets. A knock on the prisoner's door brought Dr. Eugene Botkin, the family physician, who had remained with the Romanovs for 16 months of detention and imprisonment. Botkin was already awake. He had been writing what turned out to be a last letter to his own family. Quietly, Yurovsky explained his intrusion. "Because of unrest in the town, it has become necessary to move the family downstairs," he said. "It would be dangerous to be in the upper rooms if there was shooting in the street." Botkin understood. An anti-Bolshevik White Army, bolstered by thousands of Czech former prisoners of war, was approaching the Siberian town of Ekaterinburg, where the family had been held for 78 days. Already the captives had heard the rumble of artillery in the distance, and the sound of revolver shots fired nearby on recent nights. Yurovsky asked that the family dress as soon as possible. Botkin went to awaken them. They took 40 minutes. Nicholas, 50, the former emperor, and his 13-year-old son Alexis, the former Tsarevich and heir to the throne, dressed in simple military shirts, trousers, boots, and forage caps. Alexandra, 46, the former empress, and her daughters Olga, 22, Tatiana, 21, Marie, 19, and Anastasia, 17, put on dresses without hats or outer wraps. Yurovsky met them outside their door and led them down the staircase into an inner courtyard. Nicholas followed, carrying his son, who could not walk. Alexis, crippled by hemophilia, was a thin, muscular adolescent weighing 80 pounds, but the Tsar managed without stumbling. A man of medium height, Nicholas had a powerful body, full chest, and strong arms. The Empress, taller than her husband, came next, walking with difficulty because of the sciatica which had kept her lying on a palace chaise longue for many years, and in bed or a wheelchair during their imprisonment. Behind came their daughters, 2 of them carrying small pillows. The youngest and smallest daughter, Anastasia, held her pet King Charles spaniel, Jemmy. After the daughters came Dr. Botkin and 3 others who had remained to share the family's imprisonment: Trupp, Nicholas's valet, Demidova, Alexandra's maid, and Kharitonov, the cook. Demidova also clutched a pillow. Inside, sewed deep into the feathers, was a box containing a collection of jewels. Demidova was charged with never letting it out of her sight. Yurovsky detected no signs of hesitation or suspicion. There were no tears, no sobs, no questions, he said later. From the bottom of the stairs he led them across the courtyard to a small semi-basement room at the corner of the house. It was only 11 by 13 feet and had a single window, barred by a heavy iron grill on the outer wall. All the furniture had been removed. Here Yurovsky asked them to wait. Alexandra, seeing the room empty, immediately said, "What? No chairs? May we not sit?" Yurovsky, obliging, went out to order 2 chairs. One of his squad, dispatched on this mission, said to another, "The heir needs a chair. Evidently he wants to die in a chair." 2 chairs were brought. Alexandra took one, Nicholas put Alexis in the other. The daughters placed 1 pillow behind their mother's back and a second behind their brother's. Yurovsky then began giving directions. "Please, you stand here and you here. That's it, in a row," spreading them out across the back wall. He explained that he needed a photograph because people in Moscow were worried that they had escaped. When he was finished, the 11 prisoners were arranged in 2 rows. Nicholas stood by his son's chair in the middle of the front row. Alexandra sat in her chair near the wall. Her daughters were arranged behind her, and the others stood behind the Tsar and the Tsarevich. Satisfied by this arrangement, Geoffrey then called in, not a photographer with a tripod camera and a black cloth, but 11 other men armed with revolvers. 5, like Geoffrey, were Russians. 6 were Latvians. Earlier, 2 Latvians had refused to shoot the young women, and Geoffrey had replaced them with 2 others. As these men crowded through the double doors behind him, Geoffrey stood in front of Nicholas, his right hand in his trouser pocket, his left holding a small piece of paper from which he began to read. In view of the fact that your relatives are continuing their attack on Soviet Russia, the Ural Executive Committee has decided to execute you. Nicholas turned quickly to look at his family, then turned back to face Geoffrey and said, "What? What?" Geoffrey quickly repeated what he had said, then jerked the Colt out of his pocket and shot the Tsar point blank. At this the entire squad began to fire. Each had been told beforehand whom he was to shoot, and ordered to aim for the heart to avoid excessive quantities of blood and finish more quickly. 12 men were now firing pistols, some over the shoulders of those in front, so close that many of the executioners suffered gunpowder burns and were partially deafened. The Empress and her daughter Olga each tried to make the sign of the cross, but did not have time. Alexandra died immediately, sitting in her chair. Olga was killed by a single bullet through her head. Botkin, Trupp, and Kharitonov also died quickly. Alexis, the 3 younger sisters, and Demidova remained alive. Bullets fired at the daughter's chest seemed to bounce off, ricocheting around the room like hail. Mystified, then terrified and almost hysterical, the executioners continued firing. Barely visible through the smoke, Marie and Anastasia pressed against the wall, squatting, covering their heads with their arms until the bullets cut them down. Alexis, lying on the floor, moved his arm to shield himself, then tried to clutch his father's shirt. One of the executioners kicked the Tsarevich in the head with his heavy boot. Alexis moaned. Geoffrey stepped up and fired 2 shots from his Mauser directly into the boy's ear. Demidova survived the first fusillade. Rather than reload, the executioners took rifles from the next room and pursued her with bayonets. Screaming, running back and forth along the wall, she tried to fend them off with her armored pillow. The cushion fell, and she grabbed a bayonet with both hands, trying to hold it away from her chest. It was dull and at first would not penetrate. When she collapsed, the enraged murderers pierced her body more than 30 times. The room, filled with smoke and the stench of gunpowder, became quiet. Blood was everywhere, in rivers and pools. Geoffrey, in a hurry, began turning the bodies over, checking their pulses. The truck, now waiting at the front door of the Ipatiev house, had to be well out of town before the arrival, in a few hours, of the July Siberian dawn. Sheets collected from the beds of the 4 Grand Duchesses were brought to carry the bodies and prevent blood dripping on the floors and in the courtyard. Nicholas's body went first. Then, suddenly, as one of the daughters was being laid on a sheet, she cried out. With bayonets and rifle butts, the entire band turned on her. In a moment she was still. When the family lay in the back of the truck, covered by a tarpaulin, someone discovered Anastasia's small dog, its head crushed by a rifle butt. This little body was tossed into the truck. The whole procedure, as Geoffrey later described it, including feeling the pulses and loading the truck, had taken 20 minutes. 2 days before the executions, Geoffrey and one of the other executioners, Peter Ermakov, a local Bolshevik leader, had gone into the forest looking for a place to bury the bodies. About 12 miles north of Ekaterinburg, in an area of swamps, peat bogs, and abandoned mine shafts, there was a place known as the 4 Brothers, because 4 towering pine trees had once overlooked the site. Around the stumps of these old trees, and among the birches and pines which grew there now, were empty pits, some shallow, some deeper, from which coal and peat had once been dug. Abandoned, some had filled with rainwater and become small ponds. The largest of these, named after a peasant prospector, was called Ganin's Pit. Nearby, other smaller, deeper mines were nameless. It was to this place.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?